Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Dane, how long did it take you from the time that you first got the idea that you wanted to invest in rentals until you actually bought your first property?
It took me roughly about 10 years after researching and trying to learn the real estate industry. But yeah, roughly about 10 years.
On the podcast today, we're going to figure out what was holding Dane back for so long from buying rental properties. We'll talk about how making a big sacrifice early on helped him get going, and we'll also talk about his experience buying an out-of-state property with a couple of friends. Joining us on the show today from Queens, New York is Dane Fenner. We'll take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Dane. I've had tenants that have either broken their leases or stopped paying rent, and I'm sure you know that this can be very expensive. It's very easy for the cost to exceed the amount of money that you're holding for a security deposit. And because of this risk, I started using the guarantors to guarantee my leases. The guarantors protects your rental income against rent defaults, vacancy loss, lease breaks, holdovers, and more. And this is all at no cost to you. Your tenants pay for the insurance premium. If you want to learn more about their platform, check out my bonus episode from September 15th, 2022. It's titled, Is This Better Than a Security Deposit? If you're ready to sign up, you can enroll within minutes by visiting TheGuarantors.com. Again, that's TheGuarantors.com. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property, and when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056.
Rental Income Podcast.
So 10 years. You were thinking about this, studying, learning, talking to people for 10 years. Was there anything specific that was holding you back from buying your first place?
Um, I think it was really just myself. I think I wanted to make sure I had enough knowledge and confidence to do it. But as you and most of your listeners will know, you just have to kind of strike. I wanted to educate myself as much as possible. I wanted to, network with the right people, so I would make a smart investment decision. But ultimately, it didn't really kick off until I just, struck for that first one.
Yeah, I totally get that. I was like that too. I wanted to know everything. I wanted to learn everything, but you can't know it all. It's like at some point you gotta just decide you're gonna do this and just do it. So like were you afraid of anything? Like were you afraid if I buy a property and I don't know something, I'm gonna lose money, or was there anything specific you were afraid of?
Um, I don't necessarily think it was the fear. I think in real estate, there's so many ways to make money: wholesaling, long-term buy and hold, fix and flip. I was trying to find which avenue kind of suit me best.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I went with the buy, fix, and hold. So that's the strategy that I primarily deal in.
So tell us about your portfolio. What does your portfolio look like?
So currently, I have 5 doors. I recently sold one, my very first property.
Okay, so let's walk through this and figure out how you did it. So, what was your very first property?
So my very first property came with the birth of my oldest child. Um, Once he was born, I wanted to make sure that I had a place that he could always call his home. So I purchased my first co-op apartment and lived in it for those 10 years before I actually uh, really kicked off my investment career.
Okay, so this was a property you bought to live in, not necessarily for an investment.
Yeah, so going back to what my father always told me to buy a property and never sell it. I knew getting into real estate, I just had to buy a property.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure I had a property for myself. And then during that time, I was trying to learn as much as possible to figure out how to turn this property that I was currently living in profitable, or pivot to another one. But ultimately, I was able to rent this property out. So that was kind of me getting my feet wet.
Okay, awesome. So you turned your house into a rental. Where did you live when you did that?
So initially, when I lived in it, I had it for about roughly 8 years around that time, and I built up a significant amount of equity. I was able to pull some of the equity out and renovate the kitchen and the bathroom. And during that renovation period, me and my kids moved into my mother's house literally just to wait that renovation period out. But we kind of got very comfortable there. And when we moved back, I realized, well, if I can sustain at my mother's house with my kids, I can rent this property out and just live at my mother's house temporarily
Right.
to buy the next property. So that's exactly what we did.
Was that like a big ego hit? Because I gotta think, like, if I was in your position, like saying, okay, I'm going to rent out my house, I'm going to move back home, that would be really hard to do. I don't know if I would be that committed to actually do that. Was that hard?
Yeah, I would say initially it was, but overall, I had to think of the bigger picture. I was trying to put myself in a better position and put my kids in a better position. So ultimately, it kind of just made the most sense. Why
Mhm.
pay rent or pay mortgage when I can, live with my mother and cash flow over that property to help
Sure.
out the entire family?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great thing. I mean, I really commend you for pulling that off. So how did it work out? Like, did you have a hard time finding tenants? Was your tenant good?
So luckily, my very first tenant was probably to this day still one of my best tenants. Although she's not with me anymore, but I after doing a lot of reading, I just learned to put ads up on online. I had a few open house, a few open houses. I literally did everything on my own. So I interviewed a bunch of people, got all their credentials. I ultimately settled on one tenant, and she always paid on time, never any issues outside of, the occasional toilet being clogged, things like that. But it actually is what really gave me the confidence to actually move forward in this career.
Yeah. Let's take a look at some numbers for that deal. So you mentioned that you had owned it for 10 years. So I'm sure you had a low mortgage payment. How much was your payment?
So my mortgage payment was roughly 750. And I
Okay.
know living in New York, that sounds to be very, very inexpensive.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, I did purchase uh, roughly 10 to 12 years from now. So yeah, I was able to purchase the property for roughly 114, and it's a two-bedroom co-op apartment in Queens. So back then, that was sort of expensive for the area, but now after all the equity that I built in it, it made 100% sense for me.
Did you have like a monthly maintenance fee or condo fee or something you had to pay too?
Yeah, so the maintenance fee was roughly 850
Okay.
roundabout, and that pretty much took care of most of the utilities and like for them to do lawn and grass cutting, things like that. So it left my utility bill very, very minimal.
All right. So you're all in about 1500, and then how much did you rent it out for?
So I was actually able to rent it out for 2150. During the renovation process, I added in a washer and dryer, all new appliances, brand new floors. I was actually very proud of the work that was actually done to it, and that rental price was still a little below market for the time.
All right. So you got about 650 after your mortgage payment. What about putting money aside for repairs? Like you mentioned that you just renovated the property. So did much stuff come up? Like did you have many expenses?
No, I don't really have many at all outside of, as I mentioned, the occasional toilet being clogged or things like that. But as far as anything big, I think I took care of most of the bigger potential expenses when I did the renovation because I put in all new appliances and I had the actually the maintenance workers from the co-op apartment actually do the work. So they were very familiar with how the inner workings of the building and the unit was.
All right, so you've got 650 a month. If something came up, I'm sure you could just easily pay for it out of
Yeah.
that month's rent. So that's pretty good. So you've lowered your living expenses. Now you've got 650 a month in rental income. What do you do next? Like how do you keep things going from here?
So my second deal, this is while I was transitioning to my mother's house. I had two friends who I went to college with who was also interested in real estate. And I believe at the time all three of us had that analysis paralysis type of mindset. So we decided to kind of band together and use each other's skills to buy our next property. That we initially started looking in Alabama, but we couldn't really find any multifamily deals that kind of fit our buying criteria. So we ended up in Baltimore, and we was able to purchase a wholesale deal outright. It was a three family that needed tons of work, so we paid out of pocket for the property, fixed it up out of pocket. Um, Altogether, it really came out to be a very good experience, although it took so long for us to go through that full renovation. It was pretty much a full gut that one of my partners at the time actually wanted to get out the property. So I was able to leverage a deal with my other partner to buy him out and kind of complete the project. So it all worked out.
So you guys bought the property with cash. There was no loan on that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. So you put money in, your two partners put money in, and then so you bought with cash, and then you also were able to fix the property up with cash. Well, was that a hard thing to do, like to do a rehab project on a property when you don't live in Baltimore?
so if you would have asked me when we first started, I would have told you, no, this is going to be easy. But now looking back at it, we've been tested a lot during that process. We actually had to switch GCs, general contractors, because the initial general contractor misquoted us. He quoted us way below what the work really would require. So he pretty much got through like one third of the project, and we had to let him go and then find someone else to kind of close it out. So it was a very difficult experience to go through, but I think I learned a lot about resiliency and just leveraging resources to kind of complete the task.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge project to bring on. So it was basically a gut rehab that you did to that property.
Correct, correct.
Wow.
Pretty much all knew everything.
Why did you want to get involved with such a big project for you? I mean, like you had your first property, but like this is your first like real investment. Why not? Did you consider getting something simple?
Well, I think at the time for us that was simple, and it was mainly due to price. We wanted to be able to buy something that we can pretty much own without the bank. Because
Okay.
as we was going through that process of looking at bank loans, it was always something that would kind of hold us back.
Okay.
Um, so just paying out of pocket seemed to be the easiest, and we could actually sit on the property until we had the funds to actually renovate, and that's what we did.
So with having the second contractor, did you go way over budget?
Um, so we almost doubled the initial quoted budget,
Wow.
um, but we was able to leverage credit cards and pull different money out of different investment accounts to kind of close it out. And luckily, by the time we were able to close everything out, I was able to refinance that property and pull out you know a bunch of equity to kind of pay off everything.
Wow, that's great. It all worked out. All right, so
Yeah,
you get your one partner that wanted to be done with this. You buy him out. He leaves. So now you own it today with one other partner.
correct.
And so when you refied, were you able to get all your money back that you had initially invested in the property?
So I was able to pay back one partner. I pretty much bought him out. My other partner, who was more of a silent partner, I paid him back all of his renovation um, cost, and currently He and I have both our initial deposit in as far as to purchase the property. And at the time, well, I guess a few months ago, I had all of the completion of the renovation on like various credit cards. So now I'm glad to say that I was able to pay off all of the credit cards. So I'm pretty much debt free from that property outside of the mortgage. But I kind of had that plan at the point that my partner said that he wanted to get out. I try to put together, once again, just leveraging resources to make sure that I can complete the overall task.
So how has it been working out?
Uh, to be honest, it's been really good. So the margins are very high. The area isn't the best area in the world, but typically from what I've seen in my real estate journey, if you get like a C class, B class property, that's where the higher margins are.
Mhm.
The tenant population isn't always the greatest, but I try to do extensive vetting before let a tenant live in one of the properties.
Are you doing Section 8?
No, I've actually looked into it, but I've been able to kind of get tenants the old-fashioned way, just putting up ads, reaching out to people in the area who know someone who's looking for a property, and then once again, just vetting them extensively.
So you don't have a property manager. You're doing everything yourself.
So initially, I did have a property manager, but when I had to go through the refinance and insurance and everything, I had to have a property manager who was local to the area.
Okay.
So I did hire. I currently still do not have a property manager.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So that property sounds like it's going great. What was your next property?
So my next property was in my hometown of Jamaica, Queens, New York. It's a two-family dual duplex. So it was a duplex on top of a duplex.
Uh, so is there 4 units?
It's technically two units, but each unit has two floors. So it's a
Oh, okay.
basement and a main floor, and then a a top floor, and then an attic that's built as like a studio.
And was that property a rehab or was that ready to go when you bought it?
For the most part, it was ready to go, but I think this is where I kind of got back into my rehab mode because I saw things cosmetically that I just wanted to improve. So I redid the bathrooms, redid the kitchens on all three floors. Was two kitchens, but it was four bathrooms. So I redid all of the bathrooms in both the kitchens.
So was that hard to do? Because this is in Queens, New York, which is an expensive place.
Yeah.
Was it hard to make the numbers work?
So initially when I went into it, this was roughly a little over a year ago. Um, my goal was to have a tenant on the bottom, a long-term tenant, and then Airbnb the top.
Mm.
And that's what I did, just not
Okay.
realizing that Airbnb was soon to be shut down roughly 5 to 6 months later.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Um,
New York had a ban on Airbnbs.
yeah.
So so you bought it thinking you're going to Airbnb it, and then you couldn't do that strategy anymore.
Yeah. So initially when I had it on Airbnb, that one unit was covering the mortgage and everything else. So the tenant that lived on the bottom floor, that money was just kind of savings more or less. When Airbnb shut down, I had to pivot, but luckily when I initially did my research on in the area, I knew that at minimum I can still cover the mortgage and have some reserves if I just had two long-term tenants. So once Airbnb shut down, I took that route. I just had two long-term tenants in, and it's been working pretty good so far. I have one Section 8 tenant or City Phelps, which is here in New York, and then I still have the tenant that's been there since I purchased it.
That was really smart to make sure that I think if you had bought that property and the only way it was going to work was making one of the units an Airbnb, that would have been devastating. But because you made sure that the property would work if you had a long-term tenant or an Airbnb, I think what saved you.
Yeah, and another addition to why I purchased that property, the property had a very big driveway. And at the time, I was just looking at it. Oh, it's a multifamily in New York. It's not too far from where I grew up. I can afford it. But after going through the closing and doing more research, I realized that big driveway was actually a separate lot.
Oh,
So I now have the ability to build another duplex or another two family on that separate lot directly next to my current property. So I was able to purchase two lots in that one deal.
incredible. That's great. Now, what about buying more properties in Baltimore? Is that something you would consider?
Yes, absolutely it is. I guess I was just trying to time the market, which I know is not the best thing to do because with the interest rates, how they were the past 2, 3 years, I was trying to find something that was like ideal for the interest rates. But now, once again, I had to tell myself, you just have to strike. If the numbers work, just go
Yep.
for it. So, Baltimore and New York are my two main markets as of right now.
And are you still living with your mother today?
No, so I actually moved out quite recently. I was born and raised in Queens. My entire family's there, but I moved out to downtown Brooklyn just to get a fresh start. A change of scenery.
Yeah. Did you buy a property or are you renting?
So currently I'm renting. I've always lived in a house growing up, and I wanted to live that kind of city life where I have an apartment with the big windows and things like that,
Yeah.
close to everything, all the bars and stores. So I actually moved out right about 2 blocks from Barclays. So it gives me a lot of flexibility, and it allows me to kind of network with a lot of the other real estate investors out here in New York.
Yeah, kind of funny when you think about it that you're buying properties to rent out and you're renting yourself. So
Yeah.
does it just make more sense? Is it just cheaper to rent than to buy?
So I look at it, it has multiple benefits to it. Me going into a very well established building, I'm able to kind of see how their property management conducts things, and I'm able to pull little pieces from that. Um, Also, I guess kind of getting out of the area that I'm so accustomed to, I like to put myself in different situations because I feel like that's the only way that I can grow. So coming out here, where I'm at is probably more expensive than if I was to purchase, but I know that this is kind of more or less temporary for me. Just kind of pick up what you can, network, and get to that next level. So my next purchase probably will be another multifamily that I'll do like a FHA loan into. But for now, I figure let me rent for about a year or two and kind of, push myself a little bit.
There's no better way to get over the fear of buying rentals than just deciding this is something you're going to do and jumping in there and making things happen. And it sounds like that's what Dane did. Congratulations, Dane. I'm so happy to hear that everything is working out so great for you. Well, if anybody wants to reach out to Dane, I've got his contact information on the website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 490. If Dan inspired you and you're ready to buy your first property or you want to add to your portfolio, reach out to our sponsor, Chaley Ridge. She has a ton of different loan programs. Whether you're brand new or you have a big portfolio and you want to add a property, Chaley has a program that'll work for you in your situation. If you want to find out more or you want to set up a time to talk to Chaley personally, you can track her down at ridgelendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. Make sure you hit the follow button. I put out a new episode every single Tuesday, and if you're following the show, you'll get notified as soon as the next episode comes out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.